Welcome to MPC Markets, Bulls versus Bears podcast series, Global Alpha Edition, your weekly catch-up on global markets. This week, the boys will cover Trump deadlines, do they matter for all stocks, the market wrap as per usual, and what to do with Tesla. As per usual, the content presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only and provides general advice. We strongly recommend you seek the advice of a professional before making any investment decisions.
Good afternoon and welcome to another iteration of the Global Alpha MPC Markets podcast. I've got myself and Kai today with a change of scenery in the background. We just moved offices.
Yeah, wish we could show you the full view outside. It looks quite nice, doesn't it? Harbour view.
One day, hopefully, we can get this set up so everyone can enjoy the view with us.
No, exactly right. Yeah, no, another interesting week in markets. Obviously with the US earnings coming to an end, but still, some new releases coming and stuff. Rich, what did you find interesting this week?
We've got a pretty busy week and it's kind of a bit all over the place in terms of sort of the sectors that are reporting. So there's a few smaller names that I'm looking at, but the big names that we're looking at or we have recommendations on. We've got Tencent Music reporting tonight. We've got CoreWeave and Circle, which are newer additions to our, ones under our radar, and Cisco and John Deere as well towards the latter end of the week. And then a couple of smaller names that we're looking at, NICE and Elbit Systems. So, they're in that sort of cyber space and always interesting.
And that's been a really hot sector pretty much throughout this whole year. I remember, last couple of weeks, we actually did a bit of digging in the cybersecurity sector in the US. And, say Fortinet, some of the other guys, even the ETFs, they've done incredibly well over the last year or two.
Absolutely.
And it's, it's a big sector, I think. It's kind of a offshoot. It's not as... with AI, obviously, it's a sexy theme in the market at the moment, but I think cybersecurity is almost the other side of the coin where, as it becomes more digitalized, protection on digital space becomes pretty important as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're seeing all these cybersecurity stocks do well.
Yeah, and we've seen a few big hacks in the last couple of years that I think really re-establish the importance of it in people's mindsets, whether it be overseas or domestically. Then generally in the market, you see anything in terms of inflation data and things like that?
Yeah, I think, it's really interesting because I guess with a lot of the with a lot of the central banks across the world, they've been fairly conservative in terms of cutting rates, right? So obviously we've reached the top in terms of the short-term, medium-term cycle in terms of rates. So we are going into a cutting cycle. The question is just when are they going to cut, and then, how much are they going to cut? And it's been really dependent on economic data, but we've seen a bit softer figures come out over the last couple of weeks, right? So US unemployment data was a bit of a shocker, and it's pretty funny as well because not many people pay attention to the revisions. So the previous month, they released 200K for for the employment figures, and they revised it down the next month to 14,000. And we were joking about it, right? Where if someone's got it that wrong, they probably shouldn't have a job because, if even as an estimate, it's pretty bad. So far off, right? Yeah. So not good figures, and I mean, inflation over the last 3 reports, they've been coming under expectation. So
And is that global or more specific to the States?
Well, those were specific to the States, but I think, even just generally on a global scale, we are seeing softer figures. So,
I think we've seen that here locally as well, haven't we?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And we got RBA today, so I think it's a pretty definitive cut because in the last RBA meeting, basically the expectation was all priced in terms for a rate cut. They chose not to do it. Depending on more economic figure, but I think based on the last unemployment release for Australia, today is probably going to be a cut. And similarly in the US, I think, they've basically got about 3 more cuts to come. So yeah, fairly dovish at the moment for rates.
Okay. Last week we were sort of covering off an area on quantum computing. And Guards mentioned that you're the quantum computing expert. So I just wanted you to come on today and sort of give us a bit of a brief sort of understanding of what it is. Because from my research, quantum computing is sort of going to be the next forefront or groundbreaking area for the AI space. And I was reading around Google and their AI and how much that would help the quantum computing and the speed of the processing and whatnot would assist with building out their AI and running their models.
Yeah, and it's certainly an interesting sector. I think to understand what quantum computing is, you have to dig a little bit deeper into what computers actually are, right? So classical computers, and it's often referred to as Turing machines, because if you go back in history and look at the original Turing machines, they're these monstrous, like,
Just
transistor.
a bunch of switches, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
what it is, you're exactly right, because all it is, everything's in bits, and all it means it's in 0 and 1s, right? Whether it's on or off. And that's classical computing and, all the systems that we have now. Quantum computing is a little bit more interesting, right? It's run off qubits. And basically qubits are they're a little bit different in the sense that they have 0, 1s, and a superposition of 0 and 1. And it's obviously a bit of a mouthful to say, but if you think about it, it's like, as opposed to being discrete on 0 or 1, it's continuous scale between 0 and 1, right? And they can be it's a probabilistic view in terms of how they do compute. So what it means practically, like, is it's a lot more powerful. It's with classical computing, it's linear. So that's why when you're trying to crack all these codes, right? You have to process the whole thing, and obviously with for example, think through all these classical computing problems. Some things you can't do because you just can't brute force that. Whereas with quantum computing, it's a probabilistic scale, right? So it's a lot more powerful, but it works on a completely different system. So in terms of the maturity of the technology at the moment, I had a look at the pictures on what the current quantum computers are, and they're like those old Turing machines, like they're monstrous, and it looks like a weird chandelier. So I don't know how you're going to use that on in a data center, or and there's requirements, because like for a quantum computer to run, they run off semiconductor frozen at absolute 0, or other requirements for that machine to work, right? So it's not something that's commercially viable at the moment, but that we are making progress. I've seen some boards where they're made actually that are fairly consumer size boards. But again, like, we're still talking about, like, what operating system would you use, or what use case would you use? Because it's not every single thing quantum computers beat classical computers. It's on these certain tasks that it is extremely powerful in. But it's definitely an interesting space.
Will that allow for, like, if we had quantum computing, would AI be able to, increase in its sort of capacity, I guess?
Possible, yes. Like, in terms of how the large language models work, right? They're a massive neural net in terms of weights, and basically they've got X amount of parameters that they store, and these are the weights for that language model. Now, I think with quantum computing, obviously that can add the training process to be a lot quicker. I think, it can certainly add value to AI, but I just don't think it's level of maturity, right? So, like, I think we're extremely early on. Just
Many
imagine,
years off.
Yeah, imagine we're back in the 60s in terms of computers, classical computers, right? So there's a long way for it to go, for the whole ecosystem to develop, both on hardware as well as the software needed to run these quantum computers. So I think, it's super early on.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So it's still very technical, and we're a fair bit off. So not really any investments that we can look at off the back of it.
Well, I mean, like, say even back in the days, IBM in the early days, right? Like, there was still opportunities. And I think at the moment, if you were to invest in quantum computing, you'd probably look somewhere on the hardware side, right? Because that's, as we saw this with AI, with the internet, with computers going back, classical computers going back, it's always the hardware and infrastructure that gets built out first. Then you get the networking, you get the layers on top, and then you get the software or the use case for real life, right? So I think the use case is still far, far away. Maybe you say like, 30, 40 years, right? But that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities because like if you invest in the 80s and stuff like credit is making or Microsoft early days with small ratings. So, there's opportunities, and it's just technology that will definitely continue to evolve and add tremendous value. But I think you need to know where you're looking at in terms of being able to profit at the right stage, right? Because if you're going for quantum computing services, I think there's a pipe dream at the moment because you can't, there's no infrastructure, there's no hardware build. What are you going to use for?
Yeah, makes sense.
Do you see any opportunities at the moment in that space?
I was just reading about, Google has investments in quantum computing and have said, it will allow for I was reading basically a comparison to when they first launched their Google search engine and what it did for the business. That's what they're saying quantum computing will be for their Willow chip and things like that moving down the line. So I was really someone that wasn't really familiar with quantum computing or anything like that, just reading and trying to sort of wrap my head around, where the next, where the next big boom we'll see in AI is. Guards were sort of talking along the data center lines and things like that, and I was just probably looking a bit too far ahead in terms of the horizon. But I understand that space definitely.
Yeah, no, I'd be looking at the hardware side at the moment, right? Because it's a new technology.
First.
Exactly. Like they need to have the hardware in base before they have any of the benefits in terms of service and software. So yeah, that's what I'd be looking at.
Cool. So in terms of this week, just a couple of headlines that I've been looking at. Micron Technology is one of the big semiconductor manufacturers. They've raised their guidance for the coming period. Now that's due to basically they make DRAM devices and they've had a really big increase in orders as well as their cost efficiency has gone up. So, their bottom line is looking a lot better for the guided period coming forward. We've seen a few increases in price targets from different houses, but some of the big ones have just left it as is. So, there's a bit of upside there, but we really need that earnings that they've guided, the new earnings to be matched or beaten from here, really. And then big news from Tesla with the Texas changing the regulations on the driverless cars.
What do you really reckon about that?
Tesla, we were sort of.
What do you reckon about?
I think it's going to be good.
So go ahead.
Which bit? The driverless cars, or?
Yeah, no. In terms of adoption, in terms of how quickly do you think this will be adopted?
I don't know. Like we were talking about it at home last night, and someone was talking about, would someone like Uber be a big candidate to buy up, a number of these cars and run them? And we were debating whether is it going to be, Uber maintaining a fleet, or will it be to the model that they're still in now, where you buy your car that can self-drive itself. Say you go to work for 8 hours, and then it goes and does Uber while you're at work, and getting you a passive income while you're actually working. And we were just trying to work out, is that the way that it's going to go, or will it be, the companies themselves maintaining fleets of these driverless cars? So that was a bit of an interesting thing
super
we were
interesting
thinking about.
That's super interesting. I think it's a hybrid model, right? As they always do, because say for example. So you buy these low end models, but you still have these premium services as a driver or something like that. For something, whichever one you prefer, right? So they might change the pricing model for how it works. But I don't know. How do you feel about?
Either way, though, it result.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Either way, I think you're going to see more sales on Teslas once they've perfected and got authorization to use these self-driver models. Whether it's the companies like Uber buying them to maintain a fleet, or it's individuals trying to gain a passive income off the back of investment in a vehicle. So either way, I think it's good for Tesla. Time frame wise, I still think there's probably a bit of runway there for
Mm.
before Tesla starts to really move like it used to, where it was one of the best growth stocks on the.
Yeah. I think this is a great thing because like the regulatory hurdle was always a thing that was holding Tesla back, right? Because they had the self-driving technology for years. They could have put the robotaxis on, like say half a decade ago or maybe even more. I think, but it's that initial regulation hurdle where they're going, okay, well, we'll allow this. That's really, that's really a milestone. So I think it's definitely a good thing for Tesla stock. And it's the model that it's going to evolve to, right? Because it makes more sense. I think you don't have to pay for labor; you're just paying for the capex.
Yeah, I'm interested to wait and see, and I think you'll see a lot more of different states in America allowing for the uptake of it as well from here. I don't know. I've had a few actually first-hand experiences sent to me in video for friends that have gone over to San Francisco and I think they use the Waymo
Yes.
models, and it's a bit disconcerting, I won't lie, where there's no one sitting in the driver's seat and the wheels spinning around, and they definitely said it wasn't something they were used to, and it took them a bit of adjusting. So I don't know. I'd obviously take a ride in one just to see.
Yeah.
But I definitely like the idea of investing in one, having it sitting in the car park, and then being able to go off and do a bit of passive work.
That's right.
For you, your own personal car. I think that's pretty exciting. If it goes that way, and the liability doesn't fall too heavily on you, the owner, and things like that. I think it could be a good thing for people.
No, for sure.
On the tariff front, we've seen China's had the US and China have come to push the tariffs back again, which is, I guess, a good thing for markets overall, because it's kind of just, as is usual until we really have any more information.
I mean, I think the key thing is like Trump is just using it as leverage, right? Like that seems to be how he's playing it, where he's putting all the pressure up front and then negotiating down. But I think China's you're shooting yourself too much on the foot if you're Trump and applying the tariffs too much, right? Having said that, he did put 50% tariffs on India as well.
Yeah.
Apparently they're going to pull US goods in India.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a bit of a stroke, I think.
It's interesting, but I think for now, until we have more understanding, because that's the big one at the end of the day, that's the one everyone was talking about, China and US. So I think for now, it's until we know more, it's not really going to affect things. We've got a 90-day runway before if we get any leaks or anything like that, which I don't know how much of those you can trust from the current administration.
Yeah.
And they like to talk about the good news before the bad always.
Of course. Cool. All right.
But a few other companies that we're looking at, in the coming period, but definitely for subscribed members. And we've put out a new Global Alpha this week. So, if clients want to get that guidance and advice, they definitely should jump on the website and check out Global Alpha and our other subscriptions, or give us a call and we'll guide you through and get you on there so that you're receiving the text when we're putting out these trade recommendations. They're not always, earnings based, but at the moment, definitely under the theme of earnings. And, we've been putting out some good recommendations which are already in profit.
Nice. I guess what's your opinion on the markets for the next week?
I'm pretty happy to hold. Last night really showed that the markets sort of want to grind higher, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just I think we'll see a bit of upside at the end of the week.
Yeah, I think the market, I'm in pretty similar opinions. Like it really hasn't gone much of a correction, but like it might be, it's hard to say because at the moment all the catalysts are known. I guess what unknown will cause the market to go down.
Well, that's the thing. Surprises can always shock the market.
We shall see.